It's very likely that if ever you start talking about structured water, you're going to get looked at like, that's woo, or that's pseudoscience. There can't be anything to it. And in this video, I really want to share not only the science behind it, but what truly is structured water. What are the health benefits, and what are the ways that we can structure our water to provide what I would call coherent energy and information for the body? So first and foremost, to understand the concept of structured water, we have to think of water in its true liquid state. In its true liquid state, you have water, which is H2O, and I'm going to represent it like this, with oxygen being at the top of the molecule and then two hydrogens being attached at the bottom, right? And it's not a straight line molecule, which is fascinating. Water instead forms a bend in it. It's an angle here. And this angle has been called a dipole. And there's actually things in this world that are invented that are called dipole antenna, meaning the angle and the shape of an antenna can determine what types of frequencies it pulls in. And by now, actually, we know that water is very much what's called a broadband antenna. It can absorb all sorts of frequencies, from things like the visible electromagnetic spectrum of light to sound, to frequencies that are beyond potentially our audible hearing range, to even frequencies in the non-native electromagnetic spectrum, right? Those high energy frequencies coming from things like microwave radiation and radio wave radiation. So water really truly is an antenna. And that's cool because water absorbs this information. And since we're 99%, well, not 99% by volume, but 99 out of every 100 molecules in our body is water, meaning we've got these liquid crystalline or these water antennae everywhere that are picking up the frequency information both produced inside of the body and outside of the body. So why would water in a glass actually be any different? Well, water in the glass in its liquid state is also an antenna. It's picking up frequency information and adjusting its structure accordingly. So back to structure. The water molecules in a liquid state oftentimes are seen as being random in terms of how they interact with other water molecules. And so this water molecule is going to bond on to other water molecules, but it's not a permanent relationship. Like ice, where the water molecules are very much ordered and organized in these hexagonal crystalline lattices, water in a liquid state does not have that permanent relationship with other water molecules. And instead, it can bond together, and it'll bond here for a little while, then slosh over and bond with these water molecules, and then slosh over here. And that's because the water molecules and how they interact in a liquid state is through hydrogen bonding. So the bonds that connect water molecules to other water molecules, that's a hydrogen bond. And those hydrogen bonds are not as stable, meaning that if water receives certain energy and information, vibrational information, frequency information, it actually can hold on to that information by organizing the water molecules to bond together to create a specific geometry. And this is where you have to understand that things contain vibrational information. So specific geometries can vibrate the same in a similar frequency or in a similar way as, say, that sound that we just heard or that light. If you essentially take light's a very high frequency vibration, whereas sound is a lot lower frequency vibration. Shapes, and this is the work, a lot of the work on the vibrations coming from shapes is through the work of Dr. Ibrahim Karim and biogeometry. So we have to understand that everything has vibrational information. And it turns out that water can encode vibrational information by rearranging its water molecules to form structures, literally geometric structures at the tiniest scale. So as that water molecule receives, let's say I give it even the frequency of an emotion. I give it the frequency of love, the water molecules will rearrange themselves to hold on and vibrate that emotion. So it's holding on to that frequency information. How do we know that this is happening? Well, for hundreds of years now, we've had the concept of homeopathy, right? How when we dilute substances in water to the point that the physical substance is no longer there, we still have biologically reactive or water that creates biological or physiological reactions in the body. So if it's not the biochemical substance itself that is causing the effect in the body, it must be the vibrational component, the vibrational memory that is stored in the water. This was studied very extensively by former Nobel laureate, Dr. Luc Montagnier. Dr. Montagnier actually ran some amazing experiments that you can look up. There's a lot of videos on YouTube where you could see, look up videos such as the memory of water. And what he found was that you could essentially take a DNA sequence. So remember, DNA is just a bunch of nucleotides, right, in sequence. So you take a sequence of DNA, put it in water, and as long as the Schumann resonance is present, the water will pick up that DNA frequency, right? Because each of those building blocks, that's going to have a specific unique signature vibration. And the water picks up that signature vibration, and you can actually then transmit the signature vibration digitally over the internet to another lab where there's water there that's picking up that frequency. And you can essentially imprint that DNA frequency into this water. And then you can pick that up. There's ways to visualize the frequencies. You can pick it up via things like spectrometry, but that's not even the coolest part. When this lab that was digitally sent the frequency that was embedded in the water, originally in Luc Montagnier's lab, when this water was given the building blocks of DNA, the nucleotides themselves, they rearranged they actually recreated the exact, or almost, I think it was with a 98 or 99, within 98 or 99% exactness. They recreated the DNA, the exact DNA molecule, simply by the frequency information alone, right? So what does this mean? It means that water actually is an antenna. It absorbs frequencies. It can hold on to the frequency in terms of how it structures itself. And that becomes information then for the body. And so for us, when we talk about water, we can think about the water that we drink and how that water that we drink contains energy and information. So if we were to naturally come into contact with drinking water in nature, it would be from a spring. And these springs have essentially pressurized themselves through layers of rocks and minerals, through months, if not years, of the Earth's geological cycles of day and night and magnetism and electricity, and right, all of these different frequency changes, the Schumann resonance and its harmonics, the Earth's geomagnetic pulse, all of that information would have been imprinted into this spring water. And then we would consume that spring water and also be receivers of that information. And it turns out that that type of information, when you look at spring water, when you look at the structure of spring water, it's a very coherent and really beautiful organized geometry. The way that we can best visualize this is through extending the work of Masaru Emoto, which is being done by Veda Austin. Veda is a phenomenal water researcher and just water enthusiast, water lover, who is cataloging how responsive water is as an antenna and how water can receive information. And if we flash freeze water using her techniques in a petri dish, you can actually start to see water expressing these geometries at the more macroscopic scale. Remember, things in nature are fractal, as above, so below. So the structure that we see in a bigger petri dish, let's say very organized hexagons or ferns, would actually be a fractal of what's happening at the tiniest scales of how the water molecules are interacting with each other. And so we can either give our bodies and infuse our bodies with energy and information that is organized and coherent, which would be synonymous with helping the body come into alignment and homeostasis. Or we could give the body water that has no unique specific geometries, is very amorphous. These are the types of patterns that you see happening in water when it's been sitting next to a Wi-Fi router, or when potentially negative words, harmful words have been spoken to it. And so now what we know is water is responsive, and we can then see that physically and how at the macroscopic scale through the work of Veda. Now, beyond that, what about the water that we drink, and how does it have any health benefits beyond this concept of coherence, right? Okay, Carrie, coherence. Well, yes, in fact, it does. And there's lots of studies that have been done on humans, animals, and plants. I do love plant and animal studies because there's no bias, right? These are just animals and plants that are looking to receive one of their key nutrients, which is water. And when you see growth increase by 300% with structured water versus not, or you see the yield increase massively, or you see the health of the plants just look thriving when it's being watered with structured water. These are visual cues that that water is doing something that's creating robustness and thriving health in a living organism, a plant. We see similar things with things like chickens and chicken eggs and animal growth in general, or health of animals in general. And yes, this does actually translate to humans as well. When humans consume structured water, over a period of weeks to months, you see really interesting health changes happening through looking at blood labs or even assessing the autonomic nervous system. So you will see actually an improvement in heart rate variability. So that is a very interesting metric to measure how balanced both sides of the nervous system are. When you have good heart rate variability, it means that there's good input and back and forth communication between the autonomic, the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Beyond that, then you'll also see even improvements in things like blood lipid levels, blood glucose levels, and even weight loss from drinking structured water regularly. So really fascinating things to see. And it goes beyond this. Konstantin Korotkov is an amazing water researcher. He's been studying water through looking at gas discharge visualization, or the energy, the plasma energy that we can't physically see that surrounds water, which is a measurement of how energetically rich that water is, how energetically nourishing it is. And his studies have shown from consuming that really structured, and also he qualified it as also being energized because of the gas discharge that's being emitted from it. When people were drinking that structured water, we saw things like reductions in body fat mass, improved kidney function, a reduction of what's called endogenous intoxication, meaning that the body was better able to handle and eliminate toxins, both produced from the inside of the body as well as from without. There was an increase in adaptation to stress, or an improvement in adaptation to stress, meaning when the body was presented with an adverse situation, the stress response was robust, but then adapted back to homeostasis a lot better. Improvements in heart rate, like I said, heart rate rhythm, heart rate variability, blood pressure, all of these things simply from consuming water that has high structure and then high energy as well. So we would call it structured and energized, or water that has coherent energy and information imprinted into it. Simple thing that we can do, especially knowing that tap water, when we look at the gas discharge visualization of tap water or reverse osmosis water or distilled water, those water sources, yes, RO and distilled water may be pure, it may not contain toxins, but at the same time, that life force energy in the water is depleted and there's no structure. You see very little structure in water through various visualization techniques or like Veda's work. When you look at reverse osmosis or distilled water, and tap water can contain the toxins as well as lacking structure. It's very, very energetically draining on the body to drink those tap water, and it can be energetically draining to drink those other sources of water as well over long periods of time. Now, there is potentially short-term benefit from drinking distilled water. Every once in a while, it can actually create a flushing effect through the body. So you can remove toxins and things. You can flush them through the kidneys. But long-term, we want the water that we drink to be purified, be free of toxins, but we also want to impart structure and energy and vitality to our water. So what are some ways we can do that? Well, my product recommendation guide goes through the many ways that I have vetted that we can do this. But there's a few that I want you to think of right now. One of them is through vortexing the water. There's water vortexers that can be whole house, under the sink, or simply by connecting two glass bottles together, one full of water and one empty, you can do a vortexing motion. And the company MEA Water is one that has made amazing vortexers for both imprinting the water with beautiful structure as well as energizing that water to a really vital negative charge. That's the charge that the body needs for energy, electricity, if you will. Another way to do that is through a device such as the Analemma wand. Analemma is a company that's investing a ton of money into research in terms of how their wand, which contains beautifully coherent energized water in quartz crystal glass, that water then is actually sharing frequency information with water. Let's say I would put RO water into here or distilled water. All of a sudden now I'm going to go ahead and stir this wand in my glass of water. The water that's very coherent and energized inside of this Analemma wand gets transmitted through the quartz crystal glass into this water in the cup. And now this water is also sharing in that same energy and information and structure. So there are physical ways we could do that with things like vortexing and the Analemma wand, but also I want people to realize the empowerment of being able to structure water through thoughts and emotions and intention. This is powerful because if we recognize that water is a responsive antenna, it means that I could really hold this water near me and impart compassion and love and joy into the water. And we can see the ramifications of that in the work of the experimental work of Dr. Masaru Emoto. And we can then imbibe that, and we can consume that same energy and information into the body as a way of tuning the body towards those frequencies and towards that information. Very powerful. And then even more so powerful is to recognize that not just the water that we drink is responsive, but the water inside of us is a responsive antenna as well. So this most definitely puts on or adds a new layer. It's added a layer of richness and depth into how I choose to interact with myself and with the world around me. I am very much more aware of my thoughts. I'm very much more aware of my emotions, my reactions, words I say to myself, the self-talk that I give my body. It used to be really easy to do negative self-talk, right? About how I looked or how I was performing or whatever it might be. And nowadays, I love myself, right? I love myself because I know that as I give thoughts and feelings of love to my own body, that's actually enhancing and being built into the water network of my physical body. Through the water in the blood, in the cerebrospinal fluid, in the lymphatic system, all of that water is picking up this energy and information. So this allows us then to be empowered by how we choose to speak to ourselves, speak to others, the types of media we choose to engage with. And I'm not saying I don't ever have an angry outburst. I absolutely can have an angry outburst. But at the same time, I know how to come back into homeostasis and into alignment because of how responsive that water antenna is to thoughts and emotions and other vibrational frequencies. So a little bit about structured water and why I don't think it's pseudoscience and why I actually find it to be super empowering once you understand how that structured water actually works with our bodies.